What's up, guys? It's John Dominique, the Soul Proponent. Today I want to talk a little bit about developing an ear. Developing an ear for the path to the soul and following the truth is a matter of being receptive, being sensitive, increasing our awareness, stretching our consciousness further as far as it can go, and continuing to go further into emptiness, into nothingness, stretching ourselves, stretching the fabric of our being. To develop an ear, we have to be able to listen. And it's very difficult to do because there's a lot of distractions in the world. The mind tumbles about. It thinks furiously. It thinks it can think its way through the path to the soul. It believes that thinking is the connection to value, to being alive, to surviving. But what we need to do is be aware and be sensitive and stop thinking. And that's very difficult because the mind, it's not its function, it's not its purpose, it's not what, all of our lives we grow up thinking that thinking is what we need to do. And that will, if we just try hard enough to think, that everything will turn out fine. But we need to see and continue seeing that that doesn't work. And we need to be aware and be sensitive and be receptive to the fact that the harder we try to think, the more furiously we try to think, the more intensely we try to think, the further away we get from the truth that sets us free. The path to the soul is more about an undoing, an uncovering, an unlearning, a peeling back, a revealing. So it's like we have to undo our need to think, undo our attachment to the thought process. This is a very difficult thing. Most people don't even know that that's an option, and it's not at the beginning. The way we become aware of it, the way we start, is by just seeing how we are not aware, how we are not receptive, how we are not open to the truth, and how we're not listening. The way the mind continues to function and continues to churn, and the wheels are turning, we know that that's not thinking, or that's not listening, that's thinking. The listening process is the stopping of the wheels of the turning of that cycle of furious thinking. And so what happens is, once we get to that point, we begin to practice, and there's becomes like, we begin to notice the times when we're not thinking. There's like these gaps where there's just a presence, there's an emptiness, there's an isness, a suchness. That becomes fuel for more experiences of this gap of not thinking. And we begin to feed on that, and it begins to take over. The mind will slowly start to die. So the way that happens is we have to be able to defend ourselves from judgment, because what's going to happen is the superego is going to come in and judge us for the emptiness. It's going to say, this is bad, this is terrible. And here again, it's not the first bite of the forbidden fruit that does the most damage, it's the last, because we're judging the emptiness as bad, terrible, to be avoided. We need to allow that emptiness to be there. So the way we do that is we have to defend ourselves from the judgments of the superego, because the superego will take us right back to the churning process, right back to the wheels are spinning in our head, to the thinking process. Our minds have to keep going on in these cycles forever. That's the only way it thinks it can be. There's no other option. It doesn't know any better. So this old idea of this ego identity and its thinking furiously to survive, it's an old idea. It comes from the ancient times, from the dawn of civilization, from man, and its need to survive. And that's fine. There's nothing bad about that. I'm just saying we need to see how that blocks us from being able to listen. And we need to have an ear. Develop an ear for the path. Develop an ear for the silence. Develop an ear for the stillness. And we have to engulf ourselves. We have to allow ourselves to dissolve, to release all of our attachments into this emptiness and continue to listen to see what's there. And that ear that we develop becomes a receptacle, becomes a container for something bigger to show us what the truth is. And that container will be filled with all types of treasures that we didn't even know existed, we didn't even know were possible. And it's not all so here's the thing, it's not, once we get on this path, it's going to be all treasures and all gold and all riches. There's going to be a lot of terrible things that we're going to experience as well. So we need to be aware of that and see that and not judge ourselves again, because it's easy to fall back into that tailspin where the ego is going to judge us forever and we can't listen anymore. We're not listening. We're listening to, well, it's actually more like we're listening to the wrong thing. We're listening to content of our minds instead of the background or the container or the fabric that's holding the content. That's what we need to be paying attention to. That's what we need to be listening for. That's what we need to be receptive to. We need to be very sensitive. It's a very delicate process. We have to place ourselves in position to avoid all distractions, because the world is full of distractions. There's marriages, there's jobs, there's family, there's commitments, there's careers. There's all these types of things here that are going to distract us, and we have to put all these things away in order to develop an ear for listening. So developing an ear is a lifelong process. It's a journey. We can't just think we can do it in 1 or 2 days or a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. This process take years and even multiple lifetimes. We have to be willing to pay the price and pay the cost to develop an ear for listening, because we're going to have to give up things that we didn't even know we were trying to hold on to, like an unconscious need to be attached to our thinking process, the unconscious need to depend and be reliant upon concepts of our identity, of who we think we are, of time. And these are nothing but concepts. Concepts don't really exist in reality. They don't have any material existence in objective reality. They're just subjective experiences, but we think we have to try to make them real. We have to concretize them. We have to make ourselves into something that we can hold on to, because if we don't, we feel like we're going to die. And that's how it feels on the path to the soul. Developing an ear for listening does feel like death multiple times over and over. It's not like it's just going to be once or twice. It happens multiple times and it keeps coming up. We keep running into barriers and obstacles that come up over and over again on the path. And we have to continue to see them and see what these blocks are about and to understand them. So developing an ear for listening has to do a lot with understanding, excuse me, especially our own personal experiences and our histories, the things that have happened to us that block us from doing the listening that needs to occur for spiritual awakening. This is a very long, arduous process, but I know for a fact that there's people really want this, but they don't know they want it. They think they can, they think they want something else. Like they want the feeling of value, and they think they can get the feeling of value by thinking and thinking harder and trying harder. It's not the way it works on the path to the soul. It's the reverse. It's upside down. It's a matter of letting go of the need to make efforts. And we have to be able to develop and see how much of an effort we're putting forth into this process, and then we have to begin to let go of our need to put forth effort, and then to begin to let go of the process of letting go. So it's kind of like we develop non-attachment, and then we develop and practice non-attachment towards the practice of non-attachment. And logically speaking, we know that this will lead to freedom, liberation. I mean, just think about it, and you can just see that that's what it will do. But to practice it is a whole different thing. Like the mind in theory thinks it can, and maybe it can think its way through it for a while, but if we do that forever, we're just gonna kind of suffer. So we need to see how the process works. And sometimes that's part of the process. We have to get more stuck and more entrenched and suffer even more, because that's how we're going to learn. Sometimes that has to happen, and we have to take that with a grain of salt and step back and see that that's part of the process. If that's what it takes, then that's part of the price we have to pay. That's part of the cost. So unlearning, undoing, reversing the need to do anything, to lift a finger, is part of developing an ear for spiritual awakening. Developing an ear is a very subtle process. We have to get very quiet, very still, to the point where we feel the rotation of the earth. That's how still we have to get. And this happens, like, it's not going to happen overnight. Like, you have yogas out in the mountains practicing this type of thing for years. And that's what we need to get to. It takes a long stretch of practice, devotion. It's very difficult, but it can be done. There's a path, and we realize what the path is by finding out what the path is not. We reveal the truth by looking deeply into what's false. And that's how the process works, the path to spiritual awakening. Developing an ear is a very important piece of this process. John Dominique, the Soul Proponent.